Welcome, everybody, to this week's problem set, which will be paper session number 5, and it deals with the topic of candidates. And if I'm correct, this will be the last paper session that we have in this semester. I think next week we will have one more problem set with respect to the topic of legislatures, and then I think we'll have a mock exam. Okay, so we will talk about one paper today. I think it will be sufficient for the whole 90 minutes. And the paper is by Callender, and the title is Political Motivations. So, in particular, it deals with the question on what the motivation of politicians is who are holding a public office. Okay, so if you see politicians who are in charge, what are their motives to do politics? So, in particular, you could divide this into two categories. So first of all, do they care about political outcomes? Yeah. So do they care about the policies that they're going to vote about and put in place? And are they somehow standing or representing what they stand for, really? Those are so-called policy motivated politicians. Yeah. So they care about the policy which is implemented while they are in office. Obviously, a politician could also be like motivated by simply being in office. So this is called office motivated. So those are politicians who are benefiting basically from just being politicians. So all the benefits that you can think of, the power that you have. In some countries, also the salary is quite nice, and yeah, it opens your doors to be a politician, which you probably wouldn't have if you're just a citizen. So politicians who are motivated by being in office are called office motivated politicians. And what this paper is doing is that it's using a simple model to shed light on these questions. And it does so by taking a standard election model and introducing private information and post-election behavior into it. Yeah, so this is the kind of, those are the two extensions of the paper. Because apart from this, the paper is quite standard. And by doing so, the paper first shows that the classical result, so the classical result of the median voter theorem, does not necessarily hold anymore. Okay, so the median voter theorem is saying that, so first of all, it's saying that all that matters for the candidates is the behavior of the median voter, which still holds true here, but it also says that since only the behavior of the median voter matters, the candidates will try to locate themselves as close as possible to the median voter, in a sense that they want to choose ideologies or platforms, political platforms, such that the median voter votes for them. Because if the median voter is voting for them, they have definitely the majority in the election and they win the election. And what is shown here is that with these extensions, candidates do not necessarily have an incentive anymore to locate themselves close to the median voter. Okay, they can win the election even if they're not closer to the median voter than the other candidate. The main results of the paper are that, first of all, the paper finds that office motivated candidates are actually favored in elections. But policy motivated candidates also win a significant fraction of elections. So this basically means that if we simply take the winner of an election and look at him and want to infer whether he is policy motivated or whether he is office motivated, this first result would say that with a higher likelihood, he is office motivated. The paper then proceeds to endogenize the candidate pool, because for the first result, it was assumed or exogenously assumed that there is a fixed rate of candidates who are potential candidates who are of a particular type or are office motivated in the candidate pool, which could potentially go to election. Now, what the paper does in the next step is it is endogenizing the candidate pool. It is doing this by allowing citizens who can be either office motivated or policy motivated to become candidates. And by doing so, it finds that the majority of citizens who are actually entering the candidate pool are policy motivated. So this is, in some sense, kind of counteracting the first result by saying that, okay, it might be that office motivated candidates are favored in elections, but if in the pool of candidates the number of policy motivated candidates is very high, then it simply means that conditional on this information, if we look at a politician who's winning the election, the likelihood that he is office motivated is very low because the number of office motivated candidates is very low in the candidate pool. Yeah, so this is kind of a result counteracting the first result to some extent. But yeah, let us start with the model. So there are n citizens, and n is an odd number. Yeah, so this simplifies winning by the majority rule. So it cancels out situation where you would have a tie. There are two candidates A and B. Oh, this is a little bit too thick. So there are two candidates A and B, and candidates choose their policy position xj. Okay, X policy position. Sometimes I'm using ideology, and sometimes I'm using platform. Yeah, so those are interchangeable. So I always mean the same thing. So in the model, a single election is held, and the winner of this election is determined by the majority rule. So whoever has a higher number of votes wins the election. And since all the citizens have to vote for either of the candidates, a consequence will be that there will always be a winner, a unique winner. And just for notation, the winner is denoted by W, and so small w, and he receives benefit capital W. So this is kind of the benefit of being in office. In addition, the winner is choosing an effort level which is in between 0 and 1, and this is kind of determining the quality of policy implementation. But we will see how this will affect the utilities of the agents in a second. The costs of effort, so there are costs of effort, and they're convex, and they're given by gamma times the effort chosen by the power of 2. And the effort is determining, so this is what I said before, the quality of implementation of policy choice, and it is denoted, so the quality is denoted by 1 minus E. And now you might be confused because 1 minus E is strictly decreasing in effort, so why should the quality be strictly decreasing in effort? Well, the reason is that if we take a look later at the utility, actually this term here will flow negatively into the utility. So the higher the effort, the less or the smaller is the negative term in the utility. And this is kind of reflecting the quality of implementation choice. Yeah, so the higher the effort chosen, the higher are the utilities of the candidates. So the policy outcome space is then given by capital P, and it's kind of a mapping from, oh no, it's not a mapping, but the space itself, it's a product of the real numbers, which was the space of policy choice, and the space of effort choice. Yeah, so this is the outcome space of the policy. So it's a choose. So depending on the winner, it's a chosen ideology or a policy position, and it's a chosen effort by the winner. Now, voters only observe the policy positions before voting, but not the efforts. There is uncertainty in what the winner of the, so kind of there is uncertainty in the effort that the winner will choose if he wins, or what a candidate will choose if he wins. And this is the timing of the game, which I took from the paper. So in stage one, nature is drawing the motivations for the candidates and the voters. We will come to this in a second. In a second stage, candidates commit to policy positions. So they really commit, so they cannot change their policy position once they win the election. In a third stage, voters observe the policy positions and cast votes. So they vote for either of the candidates. In stage four, the winner is decided, and the incumbent, so the winner, is implementing the policy commitment. So it's then realizing the policy position that it has chosen, and it exerts effort. In the final stage five, policy outcome is determined and payoffs are received. So let us talk about preferences of the agents. So all agents in the model, so both candidates and voters, derive utility from the policy outcome XW EW. So the ideology chosen by the winner and the effort. So all agents are preferring more effort, but they can differ with respect to their ideological preferences. So we have some degree of heterogeneity in the model. So a voter's ideal policy position is denoted by PI, and then the ideal position of the median voter is simply given by PM equal to 0. So we're just normalizing the median voter ideal position to be at 0. Now candidates also have ideal positions, and they're located symmetrically around 0, and A, so candidate A is located at minus alpha, and candidate B is located at alpha. So they have the same distance to the median voter's ideal position. Now let's talk about the types. So agents can differ on the utility weight, which is denoted by beta t, which they assert to policy. So they have some weight which determines how much they like the candidate being close to their ideal position and how much they like a candidate to choose high effort. A type is denoted by T, and T can be either high or low. So there can be either a high type or low type. And the probability that an agent is of a low type is simply equal to Q. Q is then simply a number between 0 and 1. And those types are private information, so only the agent itself knows its type. So the utility function of the voter is given by the following. So for voter I, who has the ideal position PI, the utility of the winner choosing ideology XW and effort EW is given by the following. So it's the difference between the true ideology, like the ideology of the agent of the voter, minus the chosen platform of the winner by the power of 2. So this is a measure for distance, plus 1 minus the effort chosen by the winner by the power of 2. And keep in mind that this will be multiplied with minus. Therefore, the closer the winner's chosen platform to the ideology of the voter, the better it is. And in addition, the higher the effort chosen by the winner, the better it is for the voter. And as you can see, this whole term will get multiplied with beta t, which means that if you are of a high type, so I think one thing that I missed out here, obviously, is that beta h is strictly larger than beta l. Okay, I think I didn't put this information here, but obviously it should be the case here. And since this is the case, what we will say is that if you are type H, so a high type, it means that you are policy motivated. If you are type L, it means that you're office motivated. And the reason is simply because agents, or at least in this case, voters who have a high type, they care more, so they're more affected about what the winner is doing than voters who have a low type. Yeah, so high types here are called policy motivated and low types are called office motivated. So let us talk about the preferences of the candidates. So the utility of candidate A, so I'm focusing here on candidate A because for candidate B it will be basically the same. So the utility of candidate A, if the winner is choosing XW and EW, is given by the following. So again, the first term here, it's the distance between the true ideology of candidate A and the chosen ideology or platform of the winner. And again, also a term reflecting the quality of a policy implementation. This will be again multiplied with the weight which the different types assert on policy outcomes. And in addition, then there is the right-hand side here. This is reflecting the utility of being in office. So to some extent, the first part here, so the W, capital W, this is reflecting the benefit of being in office. So this is simply a constant term, which you get only if you win, because the first term that you see here, which you multiply with the term in brackets on the right-hand side, is 1 if you win, and it's 0 else. So if you win, you will get W minus gamma times EW by the power of 2. So this is the costs of like effort which you choose in order to affect the quality of the policy implementation, and W is simply the benefit of being in office. And as you can see, if beta L, so if beta L here is your low type and beta L is very small, you only benefit from the right-hand part here, so the benefits of being in office, and do not care about policy. Yeah, so this is the reason why H types or high types are policy motivated and L types are office motivated. So voters, they do not know the type of a candidate. So they don't know whether a candidate is office motivated or policy motivated. What they need to do, but they have a prior, and the prior was given by Q. So the Q is common knowledge. What they need to do is they need to update their prior beliefs, Q, using policy positions XA and XB. So depending on which positions the candidates are choosing, the voter needs to infer or update his prior beliefs in order to get his posterior beliefs that a candidate, J, is of a type low or high. And the posterior belief of a voter that candidate J is of type low, given the policy position xj, is denoted by pi j xj. Yeah, so this is further notation that we will need. And what voters are doing is that they vote for the candidate who is maximizing their expected utility. Yeah, so you have some uncertainty. So you will have the preferences that I introduced before. You will have expectations about around this this term, and then you're choosing for the candidate who gives you the higher expected utility. And the idea here is that since the voters are rational and they can update their beliefs, they somehow can infer by the behavior of the candidates whether they are office motivated or policy motivated. So you could think of if an so that also one thing that I forgot to say is that the voters know the true ideologies of the candidates. So they know that candidate A is located at minus alpha, and that then they know that candidate B is located at alpha. That's also very important. I forgot to mention this. And because they know this, they can make some inference. So, for instance, you could think of an individual or a candidate who is positioning himself very close to his true ideology. So, you could think of this individual being, or this candidate being policy motivated rather than being office motivated, and an individual, I'm always saying individual, but I'm meaning candidates. So a candidate who is locating himself close to the median voter, so he's maximizing basically the probability of winning um, by affecting the median voter. You could think of this candidate to be office motivated. So, yeah, so this is how the beliefs work. But as we will see, it's a little bit more complicated. So all voters who are to the left of the median voter, which means that the PI is strictly larger than 0, they vote for candidate A, and all voters who have PI strictly larger than 0 vote for candidate B. And the consequence of this is that candidates only need to consider the voting behavior of the median voter, because for whoever the median voter is voting will get at least 50% of the votes. Okay, because the median is like the definition of the median is that it's the voter who has 50% of voters below him and 50% of the voters above him. So if you catch the median voter, you win the election. Now, given chosen policy positions XA, XB, so which we'll summarize in the vector X, Rx is the probability that the median voter votes for candidate A. And if the median voter is indifferent, then this probability will actually be a non-trivial probability. So it will be between 0 and 1. If he's not indifferent, then Rx will be either 0 or 1. If it's 0, then candidate B will win with certainty. If it's 1, then candidate A will win with certainty. So let us talk about the solution concept. So the solution concept here is perfect Bayesian Nash equilibria, because we have, like, it's an extensive form game. So there is a kind of a time dimension in the model. So that's why it's a perfect Bayesian Nash equilibria. And it's a Bayesian Nash equilibria because we have private information in this model, yeah, with respect to the types. An issue here, it's like for this particular model, is that there exist multiple equilibria for different out of equilibrium beliefs. So the idea here is that, or the problem here is that, given that voters see that a candidate is choosing an out of equilibrium policy commitment, what do they believe about the type of the candidate? So if you're not familiar with this, this is a big issue, because if you do not, or if you allow for any types of beliefs, then there could be very strange equilibria where off the equilibrium path, there is behavior induced just by very unrealistic beliefs. And this creates a situation of multiple equilibria. So there are several equilibria in such models which are simply implausible because they're relying on very strange out of equilibrium beliefs. And in order to encounter this, not only this paper, but literature came up with a bunch of kind of concepts which are defining what agents in a model believe if they receive an out of equilibrium, if they see out of equilibrium behavior. And the thing is that I'm saying out of equilibrium because the game will, since the game is in equilibrium, it will never reach those situations, but still, what happens out of equilibrium is determining what happens in the equilibrium. So you need to be careful about how you're defining what happens out of equilibrium. That's a whole topic by itself, but this is also an issue which is in this paper, like which is appearing in the paper. And what's the approach here is, so how does the paper deal with this issue? Is that it's defining in a very extreme way what people like the voters believe out of equilibrium um, with respect to the type of um, the candidates. So so the voters believe with probability 1 that the deviation came from the type who benefited the most. So as you saw before, an office motivated and a policy motivated candidate have different utility functions because they have different weights which they assert to the policy part of the utility function. Therefore, depending on whether a candidate is making a deviation closer to the median voter's ideal position or closer to his ideology, it benefits one of the types more than the other type. And this is a simple approach here to say that voters believe with probability 1 that depending on the deviation, it was made by the candidate who benefited, or by a candidate type who benefited the most from this. And this is this is a nice way to circumvent this problem of multiple equilibria, because as you will see, they're it will actually lead to uniqueness of equilibria in the model, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. So the focus of the equilibria in the model is on symmetric equilibria. So, okay, the uniqueness that I told you before, it will be with respect to only with respect to symmetric equilibria. So there are three different types of symmetric equilibria, which will be considered in a paper. So the first one are so-called separating equilibria. So that's the first type. And in this, candidates are using strategies such that the voters can perfectly infer the types for any action. So put it simply, it means that for any choice of policy positions, the candidates can exactly infer the type of the candidate. The voters can perfectly observe or infer the type of the candidates, and they know with certainty that it's true. Yeah, so there is this is also happening then in equilibrium. So if a voter is believing that a candidate is of a particular type because of his policy position, then it's indeed true. So he's correct. And it means that in a separating equilibrium, there is no uncertainty with respect to the kind of ex post behavior of of candidates. So if they won the election, the um, the voters at the point where they're deciding for whom to vote know exactly uh, who is going to choose which type of effort when he wins. Then there are pooling equilibria. So in pooling equilibria, we are in the exact opposite. So here, candidates are using strategies such that the voters cannot infer their types. So this can only be the case if candidates are choosing the same policy position independent of their type. Yep. So when they're simply independent of whether they're office motivated or policy motivated, they're choosing the same policy position. And then finally, we have semi-separating equilibria, and those are all other types of equilibria that you could think of. Okay, so let's talk about the results. So lemma 1 is kind of a general result of the model. So this holds quite generally. So here we do not need any belief refinement and so on. So it's referring to the effort level chosen by the winner of an election. So in equilibrium, the effort level of the elected candidate is beta t divided by beta t plus gamma for all types. And as you can see, effort is increasing in policy preference and decreases in effort costs. So put it simply, the effort level chosen by a policy motivated candidate is higher than the effort chosen by an office motivated candidate. And the reason is simply because beta h divided by beta h plus gamma is strictly larger than beta L divided by beta L plus gamma. So even though this is a simple result, you will see that it's quite crucial for the Romanian results, because the consequence of this will be that the median voter does not only care about the closeness of the winning candidate's chosen ideology or platform to his his ideal position, but he will also care about the effort chosen by the elected candidate. And since the effort chosen by a policy motivated candidate is higher than the effort chosen by an office motivated candidate, this will also affect the voting behavior of the median voter. So this is the reason why this result is quite necessary for the rest of the results of the paper. So before coming to the main model, we will go quickly through two benchmark models. And there we will see that the classical median voter theorem result will still hold. So this is to show that the extensions which are considered in this paper are somehow sufficient to get away from the median voter theorem, like the classical median voter theorem. So the first benchmark that we're considering is homogeneous candidate motivations. So in this benchmark, both candidates have the same motivation, which means that they can be both types. So they can be policy motivated and office motivated, but both candidates have the same motivation. So either both of them are policy motivated when they're competing to each other, or both of them are office motivated. And lemma 2 is saying that if the probability of an agent being office motivated is strictly between 0 and 1, then a unique equilibrium exists in which both candidates A and B are locating themselves at the median voter's ideal point. And as you can already see, this is the standard median voter theorem. So what you basically have is that independent of whether both candidates are policy or office motivated, the chosen ideologies will converge to the middle. Yeah, so you will not have divergence. So divergence would be a situation where the candidates would go to their or choose their true ideologies, but here you will have the convergence to the middle. Yeah, and this is the standard median voter theorem result. Now, kind of, what is the intuition here? So why is this happening? Well, if you look at lemma 1, what you see is that if both candidates have the same motivation, then also the effort chosen by the winner will be the same because they have the same motivation. As a consequence, the median voter does not care anymore about who is winning. Okay, this is wrong. The median voter does not care anymore about the ex post election or post election behavior of the winner, because the chosen quality levels, the chosen effort levels, so this should be effort, the chosen effort levels will be the same independent who's winning because they have the same motivation. So if the median voter doesn't care anymore about the effort levels which are chosen after the winner of the election is determined, what does the median voter care about? Well, he cares about the ideologies chosen or the policy positions chosen by the candidates, and therefore competition only happens in this dimension, and the consequence is that the standard median voter theorem holds. Because we eliminated basically the dimension of competition with respect to effort. Now, let us come to the second benchmark. Here, we have constant quality, we have a constant quality of policy implementation, which means that, this benchmark, the quality of policy implementation is, as I said before, it's constant, so it cannot be affected by, by the choice of effort. So lemma 3 is then saying that if the policy space is the real numbers, then, so it's the real numbers because there is no choice of effort anymore, then for any Q, there exists a unique equilibrium in which both candidates A and B are locating themselves at the median voter's ideal point, regardless of the type. And here, this is again the standard median voter theorem. And the reason is because if quality is constant, so it cannot be affected by effort, again, the median voter is indifferent between the post-election behavior of the winner, and hence competition again happens between the candidates only through the dimension of chosen ideologies. And this is the reason why we will have again convergence to the middle. And this is basically, so the two benchmark cases are somehow showing you that if we drop one of the extensions, which is considered in this model here, then we are back to the classical result of the standard median voter theorem. And it shows you that it will be necessary to consider both extensions in order to get some deviation. Now let us come to the main model. So we will have heterogeneous motivations. This is the main setup of the model. So there are two types, office motivated and policy motivated, and the candidates can choose efforts and they can actually affect the quality of policy implementation with their choice. And lemma 4 is a general result, and it does not depend on any refinements with respect to the beliefs. So what I told you before about that we need to pin down all of equilibrium beliefs, we don't need it yet. So lemma 4 is saying that in every equilibrium, office motivated candidates win with weakly higher probability. And the second point is that policy motivated candidates locate weakly closer to their ideal point. So this is kind of, this is a general result. So again, this doesn't depend on the beliefs yet. So in all the equilibria that we will see in the main model, those results will hold for sure. Yeah, so it basically means that in the model that we're considering so far, if we see the winner of an election, the likelihood that he is office motivated is higher. But again, this is only holding true for up to this point for the model. Yeah, if we consider the if we consider the extension of this model, where so this will we see in the last slides, where there is a endogenizing or where the paper is endogenizing the candidate pool, this will not hold anymore. So what's the idea of lemma 4? So why does an office motivated candidate win with a higher likelihood? Well, the reason is because moving closer to the median voter is more costly for a policy motivated candidate. Yeah, because the beta term for the policy motivated candidate is higher than the beta term for the weight which the office motivated candidate attaches to the policy part of the utility function. So a consequence of this is that the office motivated candidate has a higher incentive to locate himself close to the median voter, and as a consequence, the office motivated candidate will win with a higher probability. Because you can also choose a comparable effort as the policy motivated candidate, and then since it's less costly for him to get closer to the so it's less costly for him to get closer to the median voter. He can have the same costs of effort as the policy motivated candidate, but have less costs of moving closer to the median voter. And as a consequence, he will basically win with a weakly higher probability in all types of with all types of beliefs that you can think about. Lemma 4 is also helping us in understanding the kind of belief refinement in this paper. So what I told you before is that any deviation, so for any deviation from of the equilibrium path by a candidate, so out of equilibrium behavior, the voters believe with certainty that the candidate who deviated has the type for which this deviation was most profitable. Okay, so this was the definition of the belief refinement. Now, if a candidate is deviating towards this ideal point, so this is a consequence of lemma 4, voters believe that he's policy motivated. So why is that? Well, a deviation from any point towards the ideal point is less costly for a policy motivated, or it's better, no, it's not less costly, but it's, yeah, you can frame it like this. It's less costly for a policy motivated candidate than for an office motivated candidate, because the policy motivated candidate has a higher marginal utility of kind of minimizing the distance between his true ideology and his chosen ideology. On the other hand, a deviation away from his ideal point towards the median voter ideal point is making voters believe that he's office motivated. Yeah, so this is a consequence of the belief refinement in the paper. And since lemma 4 is telling us something about the incentives of locating closer to the median voter, we can use this to understand how this belief refinement is actually impacting the behavior in the model. So the next result that we will consider is actually relying on the belief refinement. So it's using the idea that I introduced before with respect to the beliefs. And it's actually restricting the set of possible equilibria, and it's characterizing the pooling equilibria in the game. So lemma 5 is saying the following. For any Q, the following holds. First, a pooling equilibrium at the median voter's ideal point does not exist if alpha is strictly larger than 0. Second, if a pooling equilibrium exists, then candidate A locates himself at minus alpha, and candidate B locates himself at alpha. So they locate themselves at their ideal points, at their true ideologies. So let us build some intuition with respect to lemma 5. So let's suppose that both candidates are locating themselves at the median voter independent of the type. So I will draw, some real line here. I mean, the policy space is the real numbers, but let's simply take some bounded policy space for the second just to understand this. So let's say the median voter is located here, and both candidate A and B are also located at this position. And they do this independent of their type. Now, let's say that at this point here, we have minus alpha. So this is 0. Let's say here it's minus alpha, and here we have alpha. So the true ideologies of the candidates. Now let's start from the position or a situation where both have chosen the true, like the ideal policy of the median voter, which was 0. So now in this situation, the median voter is benefiting because, yeah, his ideal position is chosen. But that's not the only kind of the only thing which matters for the median voter, because the median voter also cares about the effort which is chosen by the winner. So he is uncertain whether the candidate he votes is policy motivated or office motivated, yeah, because for both types they're choosing the same thing, so he cannot infer anything about this behavior, about the type. So consequence is that he is uncertain about the quality of the policy implementation. So since he does not know whether a candidate is of a high or a low type, he does not know whether effort will be high or low. And this also affects his utility. So let me just copy this picture here over. Put it somewhere here. Now, if one of the candidates gets slightly closer to his ideal point, there should be an L here, then due to the belief refinement, the median voter is believing with certainty that this candidate must be policy motivated. So if A is moving a little bit, so I mean, this is a large jump, but let's say slightly to the left of 0, then the median voter will with certainty believe that A is policy motivated and will choose high effort. And the idea here is that this deviation can be as small as possible. It can be marginal, and still due to the belief refinement, the median voter believes that candidate A is policy motivated. So he will choose candidate A because the chosen ideology of candidate A is still very close to the true ideology of the median voter. So we go simply very slightly to the left of, we locate ourselves very close to 0. So the distance between the median voters true ideology or ideal ideology and the chosen ideology by candidate A is very low. But since the median voter believes with certainty that candidate A is of a policy type, there is a discontinuity with respect to the utility of effort, related to the effort part, yeah, because he believes that candidate A will choose higher effort. And due to this, he will elect candidate A with certainty. But then the same logic would apply on the other candidate. So he would then get marginally closer to his ideal point, starting from the point that A has chosen, on the other side then. So if A is here, then B would go here and a little bit more to the right. And then the same logic would apply again. Yeah. And the consequence is that we will have a convergence of ideologies, of chosen ideologies to the true ideologies of the candidates. But keep in mind that in this example that I'm giving you here, it fully depends on the belief refinement. So the discontinuity happening with respect to the belief refinement. And this is the reason why we cannot have any other pooling equilibrium than one where both of the candidates are locating themselves at their true ideologies. And this is basically the statement of lemma 5. And lemma 5 itself is interesting because it's contrasting the classical median voter theorem, which stated that candidates will converge to the middle, so to the kind of platform or the ideology of the median voter. And the interesting thing is that this holds even if heterogeneity is very small. So if beta h minus beta l is smaller than some very tiny epsilon. Yeah, even if this is the case, so even if the efforts chosen are small, the deviation by the candidates towards their ideal positions could be smaller than this. And as a consequence, the result will still hold. So that's quite interesting here, that it holds for any degree of heterogeneity. So when we introduce candidate types and policy quality, then as we'll see, like what we see here, is that the classical convergence result breaks down. So we have polarization in particular. So we have the situation where candidates are locating themselves away from the median voter. That's quite an interesting result by itself, even though it's not the main result of the paper. Now, let's talk about equilibrium behavior. So far we talked about lemmas, which helped us to pin down um, kind of the types of equilibrium that we need to consider. Now we will talk about the actual equilibrium. So let's suppose that both candidates are located. Wait, sorry, I think this is just 1 second. Just checking the notes. I think I mixed up something. No, I'm sorry. Yeah, I confused stuff. So we can just continue. So now we talk about equilibrium behavior. So let's suppose that both candidates are located at their ideal points. So we start from this situation. Now, if A is moving marginally closer to the median voters, then the voters are believing that A is office motivated. And since the deviation was small, B will win the election with certainty. Okay, so if you move very kind of like slightly to the left, like okay, here it's to the right. So if you let's just draw again the picture. So here it's 0, here it's minus alpha, here it's alpha. So if candidate A is moving slightly to the right, so marginally to the right, somewhere here, then the median voter believes that A is office motivated, okay, because of the belief refinement. And if the deviation is sufficiently small, then candidate B will win the election with certainty because the difference between the two chosen ideologies is roughly the same if the deviation by candidate A is very small, but the median voter believes that candidate B is policy motivated and will choose higher effort. Therefore, for small deviations, starting from this point, like small deviations starting from a point where both candidates are located at their ideal points, they do not make sense for either of the candidates. But now let's consider a situation where the deviation of candidate A is large. So this means that he gets very close to the median voter. So this argument that I gave you before, the reasoning does not hold anymore. Now, even if the median voter is now believing that candidate A is office motivated and he will choose low effort, well, even then, A will still be close to the ideal point of the median voter because he deviated in a large way. So the median voter knows that A will choose low effort once he wins, but A is implementing a policy which is closer to the true or ideal ideology of the median voter. So you see the trade-off there. The trade-off can only happen if the deviation can be large enough. So if the deviation from the ideal point to the median voter can be sufficiently large. And in order to define what large enough means, we need to find some threshold values for the ideologies of the candidates, which will determine whether a large deviation is possible or not. And the first threshold that we will consider is implicitly given by this equation here. And it is defining, or it's the threshold is defining a policy position such that the median voter is indifferent between policy alpha 1 with beliefs equal to his priors. So he's indifferent between a candidate choosing policy alpha 1 and knowing that this candidate is office motivated or policy motivated with the beliefs equal to his priors, so the Q, and a policy 0, so his true ideology, his ideology from an office motivated candidate. So this alpha 1 is basically determining whether a large enough deviation is possible or not. Because theorem 1 is saying that if the true ideologies of the candidates are strictly smaller than alpha 1, then such a large deviation is not possible anymore. Okay, so a deviation such that the pooling equilibrium breaks down is not possible anymore. Yeah, so this is the kind of the first result of the paper. So suppose that the probability or the prior of an agent being office motivated is strictly between 0 and 1, then for all true ideologies of the candidates, which is between 0 and alpha 1, a unique equilibrium exists, and it's pooling, and the equilibrium is pooling. Candidate A is locating himself at minus alpha, and candidate B is locating himself at alpha, and this does not depend on their types, so that's the pooling equilibrium. And the pooling equilibrium breaks down if alpha is strictly larger than alpha 1. Yeah, so alpha is basically, I mean, it's exogenous, obviously, it's exogenous, but the interesting thing is that we have uniqueness if alpha is falling in this kind of range of um, policy positions, which is between 0 and alpha 1. Now, the idea here is that, so why does this hold? So why doesn't the pooling equilibrium break down? Well, if alpha is between 0 and alpha 1, it means that the ideal points of the candidates are sufficiently close to the median voter, and a large deviation to break down the pooling equilibrium is not possible. Yeah, so the idea that I gave you here, that the deviation could be large and A could be very close to the median voter, that's not possible if the alphas are very close to the median voter, to the median voter's ideal position. So only small deviations are possible, and small deviations are not kind of profitable for profitable might be the wrong word, but they cannot be utility increasing or they cannot be beneficial for the candidate who is deviating. And the consequence is that that the candidates will locate themselves at their ideal points independent of their types. And if alpha is strictly larger than alpha 1, this equilibrium is breaking down. And the reason is that then in such a situation, the office motivated candidates will want to separate themselves. So the office motivated type wants to separate itself from the policy motivated type to get supported by the voters. But this only holds if alpha is strictly larger than alpha 1. So we will need a second threshold value, which will give us kind of a interval of true ideologies for the candidates in which we do not have pooling, but we still do not have separating. So we'll have a kind of a semi-separating equilibrium. So we need a second threshold value, which is denoted by alpha 2. And alpha 2 is denoting a policy position such that the median voter is indifferent between policy alpha 2 from a policy motivated candidate and policy 0 from an office motivated candidate. Yeah, so this is kind of determining again when, so before in theorem 1, a large deviation was not, or like a large deviation which was beneficial for both types was not there. In this situation, so if alpha is between, I think it's, let me just check to be sure. Yeah, it's between alpha 1 and alpha 2. A large deviation, like a sufficiently large deviation, is not available for the policy motivated type, but it's definitely there for the office motivated type. So we will see different behavior depending on who is, like what type the candidates are. So theorem 2 is then saying that for true ideologies falling in the interval of alpha 1 and alpha 2, again, a unique equilibrium exists. This is also very nice. And it's semi-separating, which means that depending on the type, we can how to say, for some behavior. Oh no, it's not. So even so, it's semi-separating because there will be different behavior by there will be behavior by the candidates in equilibrium such that if they locate themselves at the median voter's ideal position, we know with certainty that they are office motivated. But if they locate themselves at their ideal positions, we cannot say whether they're office motivated or policy motivated. This is why it's called semi-separating. So how is this equilibrium characterized? So policy motivated candidates locate at their ideal points, and office motivated candidates mix over their ideal points and the ideal point of the median voter. Yeah, so this is what I told you before. In this equilibrium, we can say whether somebody is office motivated if he's locating himself at the median voter, but if he is locating himself at his ideal point, we still cannot say whether he is office motivated or policy motivated. Now, so what's the idea of this theorem here? So the intuition, so if the ideal points are between alpha 1 and alpha 2, it means that they're like not sufficiently close to the median voter such that both types will have an incentive to do the same, but they're also not far away such that there will be a strict kind of separation between the types. So like the office motivated type will try to certainly be distinguished from the policy motivated type. Now, if alpha is between alpha 1 and alpha 2, the office motivated candidates will have an incentive to move towards the median voter. But they still pretend to be policy motivated to some degree because they're using a mixed strategy. Yeah, because they're mixing over their ideal point and the ideal point of the median voter. They still, to some degree, because they're because the policy, the true ideology is still sufficiently close to the true ideology of the median voter, they still wants to mimic a little bit to be policy motivation in order to kind of um, give the median voter the impression that they actually will choose high effort. That's the reason why they're mixing. Now, so in this theorem, if you would have a policy motivated and an office motivated candidate to compete, then the office motivated candidate would win with a larger likelihood. Yes, so that's a consequence of lemma, I think lemma 4. Because in theorem 1, what you had is that both types win with equal probabilities because they're doing the same. Okay, this brings us to the last case. So theorem 3 is referring to a situation where alpha is strictly larger than alpha 2, which basically means that we are in a situation where the true ideologies are sufficiently far away from the true ideology of the median voter. In such a situation, again, a unique equilibrium exists and it is separating, so strictly separating, in that policy motivated candidates locate themselves at minus alpha and alpha, and all office motivated candidates locate themselves at the ideal point of the median voter. And the median voter is indifferent over all equilibrium announcements. So basically, this is a situation where the candidates' ideal points are too extreme, so they're too far away. And for the office motivated candidate, it means that it's not worth anymore to like mimic or pretend to be policy motivated by choosing a platform closer to his ideology, because simply the distance from this true ideology to the median voter is like too large, and it minimizes the probability of winning. And since a candidate which is office motivated wants to win, he will locate himself closer to the median voter. So even though the median voter knows that this is a candidate which is office motivated, he's still locating himself at his ideal point, and this is maximizing his probability of winning. Now, since it's separating, the voters can be sure that if they vote for a candidate located at the ideal point, he is certainly policy motivated. And on the other hand, if they vote for a candidate which is at the ideal point of the median voter, then they can be certain that this candidate is office motivated. And the nice things about theorems 1 to 3 are that they're each like they're defining an kind of a interval in the space of ideal points, but for any interval there is a unique equilibrium. That's quite a nice result, and the reason for this is basically the belief refinement that we considered. So let us talk about the kind of the relation between the theorems and the question which was imposed in the beginning. So what are the motivations of candidates to win the election? Now, Theorem 3 is showing that it is actually possible for a policy motivated candidate to win the election with the same likelihood as an office motivated candidate. And that's wrong because this should be Theorem 1, and here it should be Theorem 2 plus 3. So Theorem 1 is showing this because in this situation there was pooling happening. And in the pooling thing, the median voter cannot infer whether somebody is is policy motivated or office motivated, and hence, if they're choosing the same distance from, so since the ideal points had the same distance from the ideal point of the median voters, the distance is basically the same. So, and the median voter cannot infer which effort will be chosen, and as a consequence, he will simply randomize with equal probabilities between voting for each of the candidates. So in this situation, a policy motivated candidate has the same likelihood to win the election as an office motivated candidate. In Theorem 2 plus 3, on the other hand, it was shown that even though the office motivated candidates have an advantage, because in Theorem 2, sometimes so the office motivated candidate was mimicking the behavior or was pretending to be policy motivated with some probability, and with another probability who was locating himself at the median voters ideal point. The consequence of this, I mean, you can show this arithmetically, was that the probability of him winning is strictly higher here, and the same holds for the strictly separating equilibrium, because also here kind of the difference between the effort chosen by the policy motivated candidate and the kind of, or let's put it differently, the benefit that the median voter is getting from the office motivated candidate locating himself closer to the median voter is higher than the benefit of an ideal of the policy motivated candidate to choose high effort but locating himself very far away from the median voter. So because of those things, the probability of the office motivated candidate to win is strictly higher in the situations of Theorem 2 and 3. So when alpha is sufficiently far away from the ideology of the median voter. Yes, so to summarize, office motivated candidates have a weakly higher likelihood to win an election. Now, this result would then be maybe bad news for some people. So to know that if we see the winner of an election with a high likelihood or with a higher likelihood, this candidate is rather office motivated than policy motivated, so he does not care about what he is really believing, but he just wants to be in office, at least to some extent. So what the paper does now is that it's endogenizing the candidate pool. So until now, the fraction of types in the candidate pool was supposed to be exogenous, which means that it was simply assumed that the prior belief about a candidate of being office motivated was simply given by Q, and Q was element of 0, like this was strictly between 0 and 1. Now, for answering the main question of the paper, so what is the motivation of a candidate who wins the election? Actually, it's crucial to be able to determine the fraction of types among the candidate pool. Because even if we know, due to lemma, I think, was it lemma 2? I don't remember anymore. The lemma which said that office motivated candidates have a higher chance to win an election. So even though this holds, the fraction of office motivated candidates among the candidate pool might be very small. Okay, so imagine that in the candidate pool you have 1 million candidates. I mean, I'm a little bit exaggerating, but this is just to make it give you the point. So you have 1 million candidates who have a policy motivated type, and you have one candidate which is office motivated. Then at the first place, the competition between candidates um, might yield pairs of candidates which are policy motivated in the first place. So it might not even occur that a office motivated candidate is competing with a policy motivated candidate because the fraction of office motivated candidate is very small. So this is very crucial because the consequence of this is that if we see the winner of an election, he might be policy motivated with a higher likelihood because simply the number of policy motivated candidates is very large. Yeah, so this is very crucial to determine the answer on the main question of the paper. And what this paper is doing to address this issue is that it's considering an entry game. So it's putting an entry game before the election game that we discussed in the previous slides. So in this entry game, citizens, so basically the voters who are either office or policy motivated, can become candidates. So there are some costs related, or there are opportunity costs of becoming a candidate, and there will be some kind of a equilibrium in this entry game, such that there will be some fraction. So the outcome of this game will be some Q star, and this Q star is determining the fraction of office motivated candidates in the candidate pool, which you determined by this entry game. And what they find is that this Q star is less than 1/2. So it means that, so it's strictly smaller than 1/2, and it can be arbitrarily close to 0. And the idea here is that if at the first place we think about the candidate pool and pick out one candidate randomly, the likelihood that this candidate is policy motivated is higher than the likelihood that this candidate is office motivated. And as a consequence, in the total effect, if we see or pick out the winner of an election, just because of this, there is a high likelihood, or there could be a high likelihood, that this person is policy motivated rather than office motivated, even though office motivated candidates win with a higher likelihood if they face policy motivated candidates in an election. And it's strictly smaller than 1/2, and the fraction is decreasing the more a policy motivated candidate benefit of being close to his true ideology and having chosen high effort. So it's decreasing in beta H, holding fixed everything else. So the more the policy motivated candidate is benefiting of choosing his true ideology and high effort, the less will be the fraction of citizens who are entering the candidate pool who are office motivated. Yeah, and this is an interesting result. This is a very interesting result because it's kind of encountering the effects that we had due to the theorems that I showed you before. And this brings us to the end of this paper. So what did the paper do? So it introduced private information and post-election behavior in an ELSE standard election model. Yeah, so private information with respect to the types, and post-election behavior with respect to the effort which could be chosen by the candidates, so by the winner of the election. So it showed that, this was the first result, it showed that the classical convergence of chosen ideologies for this result does not need to hold generally. So in particular, in this extension here, for any degree of heterogeneity, the classical convergence of choosing ideology results does not hold necessarily. And it showed that the motivation of those who are in office does not necessarily need to be to benefit from the privilege of being in office, because we showed that individuals or the likelihood that a policy motivated candidate wins the election when facing an office motivated is non-zero. And in addition, if we endogenize the candidate pool, there will be actually more policy motivated candidates self-selecting into the candidate pool than office motivated candidates. And this finishes this week's problem set. So next week we will talk about, we will deal with a problem set about legislatures. So see you next week.